Like every day there is new challenges. Every person is different. I've not met a single person throughout my career who was the same.
Welcome back to this week's episode of The Executives, the show where we navigate the intricate world of executive leadership, exploring strategies, insights, and personal stories of successful professionals shaping the global business landscape. I'm your host, Majid, and joining us today is Burkard. Burkard Schemmel is a seasoned general manager with over 20 years of experience in B2B commerce and technology. He has founded 4 companies, held leadership roles in Fortune 500 firms, and driven growth through global services and as a service business model. Burkard also advocates for diversity and sustainability through his leadership and ESG initiatives. Currently, he is the Senior Director, Head of Sales, North Europe continent at AP Moller, Maersk. As a thought leader and author, he speaks at multiple conferences and he is famous for corporate strategy, B2B commerce and business ethics. Let us welcome Burkard. Hallo und herzlich willkommen zum Podcast, Burkard.
Thank you, Majid. It's a pleasure being here and looking forward to the discussion today.
Normally, what I do is I try to put in an element of fun just to make sure that to show people that these successful people also have a little bit of fun involved. So the fun element of today is like most of my friends know that I love food. What is your favorite cuisine, so to say, or what is the one thing that you could eat every single day without saying or complaining?
That's a very good question, Majid. And you should probably know that I'm a passionate cook myself. So one of the hobbies that I'm having is when I have time, I really like to explore new recipes. Now, some of these recipes are very complex and fancy. I even try to replicate recipes from 3-star Michelin chefs. But what I can eat every day is, in fact, Italian cuisine. And my partner, she's actually making fun of me that whenever I don't have an idea what to cook, then I cook something Italian.
Okay, that's really interesting because I come from Pakistan, and in Pakistan we are used to eating spicy food, right? So oftentimes, I mean, if I'm making Italian food, I'm tweaking it a lot. So probably if an Italian sees how I do Italian food, it would be surprising for them because I put in a lot of spices, But that's me. I love spicy food. Normally, I try to do justice because you have over 20 years of experience. Introducing you in less than 3 or 4 lines is a hard task, because you have done a lot of things in your career. Maybe tell us more about yourself. Who is Burkard?
Yeah, thanks for asking, Majid. So I think describing myself obviously comes with the challenges as I've evolved a lot over time. When I remember myself being dropped out of high school early in my career because I didn't want to learn math and Latin and all other different things, I really made my way up. And luckily, I was put into a school at some point in time where we had economics as a subject. And that really caught my interest because I was always, and I'm still interested in understanding the big picture behind. I'm interested in connecting the dots, bringing different disciplines together and create something out of it. And luckily in economics, I had a professor at school at that time who taught exactly this. It was not like learning all the basics only. It was really bringing together the bigger picture, understanding why, for example, the Bretton Woods agreement on currency exchange rates developed as it developed in, I think it was 1970 or so. So we really had all these discussions in school, and that really triggered me. And then during my time at university, I founded my own companies where I started out with classic web development and then moved into what we would probably today call enterprise content management and manufacturing execution systems. And I did that because I was always curious to understand how the world works, how something new works, how I can really innovate, and not only innovate for the sake of myself, but for the customers that I had at that time. And at this company, one of the first things my team and I did was we were one of the first companies who connected SAP down to the machinery control units at the shop floor. And I remember that this was a big challenge at that time because we did that web-based. And at this time, I'm not sure, Majid, how old are you, but you probably remember that the first Wi-Fi setups were pretty unstable and pretty slow. So we faced a lot of challenges by installing access points in factories, on the ceilings, and understanding how much access points you would need and how you would ensure that with these handheld devices at that time that were pretty ugly and looked like a strange version of laptops today, how they would work in a factory setting. And then obviously there was dust involved, there was heat involved. So a lot of devices broke at that time. And then connecting the data obviously is a whole different animal. Many production operations at that time were paper-based. And then somebody would type it later on in Excel or some other tool, and we did that web-based. And I thought it's technically super simple to do that, building, if you will, a website to collect data and then bring it in. But obviously it's much more complex. And over the course of this company, I really learned so much about concepts that are now every day on, like security, digital technology, storing of data, handling databases. I could even code myself at that time. Not sure if I can still do that. I would write SQL codes to really fetch data from databases or store data back. So all these things, and I did that because I was curious and I thought there was a great opportunity to change something for the better. And then I moved on my way into the career, working 12 years at Accenture in consulting, then 6 years at Amazon, and now almost 2 years at Maersk. And I did that because I always wanted to understand something new, learn something new, drive something forward, and really make a change. And one of the topics that I am recently very passionate about is business ethics, because this is a topic that I had been working on for many, many years. First, very subtle in a way that I just came across it, and secondly, I started writing books about it, and then now we're doing research and studies together with a few university partnerships around profitability in business ethics. And I find that super exciting. It's actually one of the topics that I think is the next big game changer in our societies globally, to find a way how we can foster ethical operations across all companies. Not only one of my hobbies is cooking and fine dining. I also love to connect the dots between disciplines. I go a lot to see contemporary art events. I live here in Berlin, where you can do that pretty well. There is tons of galleries that do openings. There's really world-class exhibitions here. And when I travel, usually I try to visit one contemporary art museum in every town that I go.
Interesting. That's a good hobby to pick, like going to a single contemporary music. But I have a question about the books. What kind of books have you published?
So I started out actually with entrepreneurship, and it really came across when I worked at Accenture that I talked to so many customers, and I felt like there was a strong need of condensing what we would call leadership knowledge into a simple and understandable book. And not so much an academic book, but more like a practice guide of how you do things. And that was long before COVID, but there was even sectors and chapters around how often would you work from the office or would you work at home? Obviously, these things all have changed. But a lot of practical guidelines of how to do things. And then I started lecturing at different universities, at ESMT here in Berlin, but at many other universities too. And then one topic was always about business ethics, because I strongly felt years ago already that this is a valuable topic. And then throughout the discussions I had with students, I realized that ethics is actually one of the key differentiators, as I said earlier. So one thing that I then changed was publishing more about business ethics. And at the same time, I was always feeling strongly that developing people and building next generation leaders is another big task. And so I also have recently published with a dear friend of mine, Charlotte Brabant, a book about hyperdiversity teams, as we call it. It's a very exciting topic, because obviously everybody talks about diversity, and when we talk about diversity, we think about male-female ratios. I obviously think that diversity is a much broader topic, and I experience that every day in my roles in business, with customers, in the organization, anywhere, that diverse teams are really just better and more successful, and it's much more fun to work with people with different backgrounds. So I started to publish a book around that to help organizations to work around diversity and really find their solution to be successful.
Very nicely said. 100% agreed that diversity is much more than just talking about genders. It includes a lot of different things, age group and so on, experience, industries. It completely is a very complex topic, like very complex.
And also different approaches to solution solving. I think that's another topic that I find interesting, that obviously when we think about a corporate culture, we think about how things are being done. And now different companies have different approaches. Some companies have very strong corporate culture and have very strong guidelines and principles how they operate. Now, other companies, they are very loose. But whatever your company is, a strict one or more a loose one, I think having different perspectives in how you approach things, how you come to solutions, is super valuable. And it's not only more successful, it's also much more exciting to hear out different people and their thoughts.
True, 100% agreed, 100% agreed. Thank you so much for that. And today we are sitting, to discuss also a topic that you partly already touched, and I think it's also very close to you, driving growth and innovation, leadership, ecosystem strategies, and business ethics. And I think it's about time we talk about business ethics, because I think if you go 20 years back, there was research work done, but there was not much practical work being done by organizations. Maybe I'm wrong, but that's my gut feeling when I look at it. Now companies talk about business ethics. They're trying to implement business ethics. But before we dive into the whole point about business ethics, let's talk about what actually inspired you to move into B2B commerce and technology ecosystems, and how has your leadership evolved over the years?
Yeah, it's a very good question. And actually it started when I was at Accenture in consulting. I had multiple roles, and I almost say that at that time in Accenture, I would probably have done all types of projects that Accenture would do at this time, from outsourcing and technology up to strategic management. And then I was really, due coincidence, I was brought into sales, and I remember very vividly a partner who is now one of the general managers of Accenture in Germany. He introduced me into sales, and then I said to him, well, I really don't know how to do B2B sales. So if you want me to do that, and I would really like to learn it, then please help me. And I remember that we together went to customers, and he was one of these guys, he would never give up. I remember vividly, we flew down to southern France to meet one of our customers near Aix-en-Provence in a beautiful country scenery where all the tech companies have one of their offices. And we had 5 things that we wanted to pitch with the customer. And the customer said no to all of these 5. And then this gentleman just didn't give up. He put out a 6th idea, a 7th idea, and an 8th idea. And the 8th idea was the one that the customer finally bought. And he didn't do that in a sense of persuading the customer into something they didn't know or they didn't want it. All these things made sense and really solved a true customer problem. And that was where it made click into my head, saying that if in a sales role you can really positively impact your customers by really coming up with new and creative ideas, what really would help their operations and make their life easier, then that's a great role for me, because that's like consulting but with a sales angle. And so I moved into these roles, and then obviously in consulting the sales is a lot about projects and then different commercial models like fixed prices, rate cards, or fees. Later on, when I moved to Amazon, I built the first Amazon B2B businesses here in Europe, where my teams worked with large and strategic customers. And that was a bit like a different angle to it, because it was the first time that in Amazon this was ever been done. And secondly, it was also the first time that many companies were approached by what we would now call a digital sales channel, where our sales was not so much a product sales like in consulting. We would not sell laptops or office paper or these things to customers, but we would tell them that there was a marketplace out, and this marketplace was called Amazon Business, and that would make your life easier. So it was more a consultative or solution selling approach, similar again to consulting. And then from that, I scaled that across Europe and was at the end responsible for strategic customers in all 5 marketplaces in Europe where Amazon operated, as well as public sector here in Germany. And that again was a totally different animal, because selling to public entities has totally different dynamics, totally different messaging, but also a totally different approach. And I really like that. And now recently at Maersk, I run a sales organization that is very much focused on the one hand side, complex logistics sales, but on the other hand side, very tactical and very, very solution oriented, quick sales of overcapacity that we bring to the market. So all these dimensions are very different. And obviously the sales approach is very different. But one thing that struck me most was that you can really make an impact by bringing something to your customers that really make their life better. And it's on you as a sales rep or as a leader then later to make that happen.
Leadership is a journey, right? So leadership has challenges all the time. And can you share one of the significant leadership challenges you faced while working with, for example, public entities? Because I worked with public entities as well. It's 1,000% agreed. It's a completely different thing than private sales. Like if you want to sell to an individual, then small business and medium business, every type of organization has a different selling strategy, right? So can you share with us what kind of challenges did you have in leadership and how did you basically overcome it?
Yeah, happy to do that. And let me split the answer in two. You asked about public sector, and I think, as you said, public sector is obviously very specific in a sense that you really need people who have that experience, that knowledge, and you have that ability to talk to customers exactly in their language and based on their specific problems or topics that they want to have. And in Amazon Business, obviously, most of the discussions were around compliance. So how can you make sure that a marketplace of hundreds of millions of items out can be used in a compliant way in a public entity? And that comes with spend levels and spend thresholds, which you should not exceed. That comes with product categories that you should not buy. Like, I guess if you work in any administration here in Berlin, you probably don't want somebody to buy champagne or IT equipment for home or anything that is probably not fitting to business needs. And that is an explanatory topic, how you explain that to customers. That has a process angle to it, how you help these customers to set up the systems properly. And in order to do that, as a salesperson, you really have to understand not only what the customer wants to buy, but also what are all the frame conditions, what are all the boundaries around. And at that time, we built a study together with a very well-known professor for public procurement who helped us to really iron out the details behind public purchasing and what it means and what it doesn't mean and what is compliant and what not. And this is made a big difference to our sales performance. The other thing I wanted to mention is more about leadership, as you said. And I think for me, the biggest challenge, and you said that very well, it's you are never finished as a leader. And that's the exciting part. Like every day there is new challenges. Every person is different. I've not met a single person throughout my career who was the same. Like everybody's different. And I met probably hundreds or thousands of people even. But one thing that was for me the biggest change was when I moved from not only an individual contributor to a manager, but when I became manager of managers. Because then suddenly what you have to do is you have to guide other leaders in order to then guide their teams. And depending on how large the organization is, you might have 3, 4, 5 levels below in your organization that you need to guide. And one thing that I'm still struggling with is how can you be as clear and precise so that the messages come as clear and precise throughout all the levels. Mm. And that's, I think, something that you can't really learn or you can't really master. It's very context dependent and it's very much leader dependent. And I think one of the advice, if I was to give an advice to anybody, is that there is a notion of doing things consistently, strictly, and with the right intentions. But there's also a notion to picking the right leaders for yourself that like to work with your style of leadership in your culture. Like I'm a very innovative leader. I like to experiment. I like to do new things. I like to give a lot of freedom to my people. Mm. And obviously when you would talk to somebody, everybody would say, oh yeah, that's great. I don't want a leader to micromanage me. But in fact, some people out in the market, they actually say that, but they don't mean it because they don't know. They would actually love to have somebody who do a little bit of micromanagement here and there. And that's not my style of leadership. And what I noticed is over time and the more experience I gained is that it really makes a big difference who you choose, and not only from a functional and scope and content perspective, but really from matching the leadership styles. And then there's obviously all the notion around the corporate culture that also has to fit. Not only yourself, you have to fit into the culture, your leaders have to fit in, and the leaders of your leaders. And that is a challenge on its own, obviously.
Mm-hmm. No, that's very true because, like, for example, when I was running my small little startup last year, I was like, I gave you a task, figure it out. Like, if you're stuck with something, then come back to me. Otherwise, try to do it yourself. Like, what's the worst case that will happen? You might do something wrong. Correct? But that's how you learn, right? I mean, I did not spend years basically doing everything correct. One thing after the next thing was correct. Everything was not right. I made mistakes. I took wrong decisions. Everyone does, right? So if we don't let people evolve over the period of time, I think you like the person as a leader is doing injustice to your team, because I don't want a photocopy of me in my, my team, because then their innovation dies, creativity dies, because then I have 5 different Majids who follow the same mindset, and they're like, you know what, let's do the same thing. And that's very true, because micromanagement is something people are not aware of. But when I see a leader above me, what I see, I don't say that it's micromanagement, but I refer to it that, look, if I am stuck, right, I would like you to be enough experienced that if I have a problem, you help me. What should I do? Because my knowledge is out. Now I cannot do this anymore. But I need your support. Like, tell me what should be the direction, like give me a hint. That's what I expect from my leader, if someone is working above me. And the same goes like on the lower board, that if I gave you a task, that take care of it. But if you're stuck, come to me for directions. Don't come to me for answers, but rather for directions. Let's sit together, let's brainstorm, let's figure it out together.
Yeah, I think a very smart person, and I don't know who that is, said that leadership is not about creating followers, but about creating leaders. And I think that's very true. You gotta enable people so that they can lead themselves and they become better versions of yourself, if you will. And I remember some of the leaders that are hired in Accenture and in Amazon, and obviously Maersk is still pretty fresh with 2 years. But at Amazon and Maersk, Amazon and Accenture, I can really say that some of these people have become much better leaders than myself by now. And I think it's great to see how they evolve in their career, and not only on paper with shiny roles, but how they really have nailed it to work with people, how they've really nailed to drive for results, to push ideas forward, to innovate. And in some instances, or many instances, they're much better than myself. And it's really great to see that. And it makes me very happy to see people develop like this. And for that, I totally agree with you. You have to give freedom, and you have to accept that things doesn't go wrong, doesn't go right all the time. And that brings me to another important topic. I think in today's culture of business, and that was one of the questions you asked me earlier about entrepreneurship and B2B commerce, I think one of the key success factors is that companies need to start innovating more. And innovating more means experimenting. I think the times are over where in Europe we would take a bunch of engineers and build the best product for years and then bring it out to the market. Nobody will care about the best product anymore. What people care is a product that fits a customer need. And this type of innovation, fitting a customer need, is not done by sitting somewhere and building a perfect product. It's about a lot of tiny iterations from a minimal level of the product up to a final, really top-notch product that is profitable and highly accepted. And by doing so, you need to have people who think of different angles and to really drive this forward. And I think that's a capability, that's a skill that requires experimentation, but that also requires that leaders accept that errors happen and that there's a culture of what you learn from errors. And that's another thing I'm very passionate about. Sorry, Majid, I can speak about this forever, as you can see, but I want to give you obviously a chance to also ask more questions.
No, that's fine. I mean, that's why we are sitting, right? The whole point is to get as much as possible from you. So it's good that you're spilling out the beans directly without me actually intervening all the time. So all good, don't worry. But now I would love to understand that how do you approach the development of, for example, as a service business model? Because now we see infrastructure as a service, consulting as a service. And what are the common pitfalls basically that business owners must avoid?
Yeah, and to me, developing new business models really has, let's say, 3 main criteria for success that I've seen over the last years. Number 1 is really you have to think cross-discipline. And cross-discipline thinking means you have to build a team that comes from radically different angles and that really looks from a different perspective towards a problem. Like if I give you a good example, if you take the car sharing or ride hailing market, and that's probably a very old example, but people can resonate to it, then many of the companies in Europe that started this are actually companies that have a big OEM, a big car manufacturer behind in their organization, but they have been set up as separate entities to really drive forward the market. So I think that it makes a big difference if you think from a fresh mind and then think about what you do. Number two is really this absolute customer dedication. I think in many ways, where we in Europe are not good is we don't think from a customer's perspective. And when somebody sends me a new app, for example, I got a new app recently sent over that is synchronizing all the social activities across an area, and they want to build a leading social app. I looked at this app and I immediately noticed that this app was developed in Europe with European product owners and European developers, because it's just, I should not say that it's very difficult, right? I think it's a European way of doing things. But if that app was involved with somebody from Asia in the team or somebody from the US, they would build an app where there's one button and you can use your Apple ID or your Samsung ID or whatever you have to log in. You don't need to type in a whole list of name and email address and wait for a confirmation email, and then the email doesn't come, and then, this whole process of getting a new service started, making that super simple so that the churn is minimized, is one example of where European companies think too complex because they want to do it perfect. They want to make sure that this is really the person. So making sure that you really innovate and making it simple from a customer perspective. And then number three is probably really a different financial and commercial setup. I think you have to distract as a service businesses from the rest of the organization, because otherwise you get always been caught up between priorities, and you always get the idea that obviously a current revenue model that is probably based on on-premise or selling products or whatever the current model is in a short term more profitable and generates more revenues. And if you do that, then your new business or you as a service business will always be left behind. It will always be priority B. And you do that in your 25th hour of the day or something else, or with the people that are left over who don't want to do the rest of the business. So you really have to separate that into a separate P&L, run it completely separately. And then when it runs, you can integrate it back. And there is some banks that have done that. If you think of the first online banks in Germany, some of them have been founded as separate entities and now been integrated back into the headquarter. And there's many other examples. So at some point in time, ideally, you build it as a service model that is so successful that you can ditch your existing model. Office 365 from Microsoft, I think, is probably a brilliant and world-class example. Years ago, at Accenture, I was not involved myself, but I know Accenture played a big role in helping that transformation years ago already. And now, have you ever seen any Microsoft CDs or DVDs or anything sold in a retail store? No, right? It's all digital. And that was a big transformation that they have done very well. And then that overtook their existing model over some time.
That's very true. I don't remember seeing a CD of Microsoft. You can download it directly and the installer is super easy. You just click two buttons, agree to the terms and conditions. It automatically does everything. I had an example.
Yeah, and when you think about when we started in my career, there was Microsoft Word was available for MS-DOS, and then it was 10 disks of 1.4 megabytes each. You need to put the disks in and install it, and then the CDs came. But it's also revenue-wise. I remember in all the software industry, there were so many debates about people copying software and not licensing it properly. Obviously, with a digital model like this, those things are all gone. You can digitally control the copies that are out. Secondly, you have a better access to your end customers, which I think many manufacturers want to do. Like if you were, a manufacturer of fridges, what you probably want to do over some time is you want to have access to your end customers and you want to upsell something to your customers. Now, if there is a wholesaler in between and a retailer or even an online channel, yeah, you can do that, but then you need to find more creative ways. And I think, again, Microsoft is a good example how they have also solved that they still have value-added partners who help you in big corporations to set up Office 365 and Windows and do these migrations. But then for the end consumer, it's a self-service model.
Yeah, that's true. Because you mentioned about an example as well, right? About this very European style of sign-up. So I was working with a client before, that was a few years back, Immobilien, real estate industry. And the thing was, the sign up was 6 pages long, like six A4 pages long. And this guy was targeting like people who have bought real estate and so on. And I was like, dude, no one will fill this, because one, the people you are targeting are rich. They don't have the time to fill a form, like fill forms, pages, multiple fields, and give them information. And if you own more than one apartment or property, you have to give information, how big, blah, blah, blah. It's way too much effort for them. I would rather say just use email, password, name. That's it. Sign up, and then get them on a phone call with one of your agents, and they type in the information for them.
Yeah.
Because he has been trying to get customers. It was not working for him.
Yeah, it's about lowering really the entrance barriers. And you now see, obviously, with the sales for consumers shifting more towards platforms like TikTok or in general video platforms, then there are studies around that. You need to make sure that your customer watches more than 6 seconds. So you need to prevent customers from swiping before 6 seconds. So that's another challenge. So you can't do that with a form of 8 pages or asking so many questions. You need to be really at the point and very precise. And I think in sales and commerce, especially for consumers, that is one of the key essences nowadays.
I mean, in sales is also becoming harder, right? Sales is also getting harder and harder and harder, especially also because of ChatGPT. I mean, when I see a sales pitch of a software, I get a feeling immediately that this is not human written. This is crafted by an AI tool. And I'm like, no, I'm not even going to make an effort to use the software, because if you didn't make an effort to even explain me how it solves my problem, why should I basically, right? And the biggest problem with the whole AI is there is no emotion. It's just text, like churned out.
Yeah, and also I think it's not localized to the markets. A lot of contacts that I get via LinkedIn is actually sales contacts. And then it's really like a funnel of 3 different messages they send over time. And I think it works probably in some markets like the United States, but I even would doubt that actually. But it works there. But it definitely doesn't work in Europe. And I'm always replying, and it might sound a bit unfriendly, but I'm always replying, hey, if your offer was interesting, I would have answered you after the first contact. So don't send me 3 other messages that sound like exactly what you said, like this auto-generated, Burkard FM. It's also funny, like they put my initials into the first name, and then you always know it's generated. Burkard FM, have you read my previous email? You probably have forgot about it or something. No, I have not forgot about it. It's just not relevant. So, but localizing these things to markets, and obviously the European market is, you probably know very well, but also in Europe, there's so many nuances between countries, how they do sales. Like I was recently in Napoli in Italy. Obviously everything that's done there, also in B2B, but also B2C, is very different to when you do that in Finland or in Norway. So, I think it's all about the success. It's all about how do you localize that to the market. But one thing that remains the same is how can you respond to a customer problem? And that's the biggest difference that I distinguish good salespeople from not so good ones. It's the ability to link your offering to a customer problem and then bring that across with one sentence.
No, true, 100%. I mean, I remember the first time I tried to sell something, it was when I was a founder of my own startup a few years back. And my German was really rusty. I'm really rusty. So it was literally, my name is this. And I was like A2 level. So that time I had not even completed like advanced levels. And I was making an effort to this small restaurant about this website, because they wrote through our website that, hey, we would like the website. And then I made him a call. Normally I was communicating in English. So, and then I started talking with him in English, and he said, no, I don't speak English. I have to speak German. I was like, okay, cool, let's try, So I literally spoke the worst German you can imagine. So if I give you context, imagine someone is saying everything is das, das Mädchen, das Jung, das Hund, das, everything is das. So, so for people who don't speak English, these are the prepositions we use before, and the articles we use before a noun. And the thing is, everything was das. And the guy was laughing, but he said, Majid, to be honest, I realized it after you said the first sentence. You don't speak German. I was like, I don't. And he's like, but I'm going to give you the project because you understood the problem, and somehow I understood what you're trying to say. So, and that was the first like sales I had to do in German. It was very interesting. So culture is important, right? I mean, the culture is important. But now, because we also should talk about a little bit about your favorite topic also, which is something also that I would love to understand, is business ethics. So let's start with the basics, like business ethics 101. So how do you define as business ethics, and why, in your opinion, or why do you think it is important in today's business environment, particularly in companies like Maersk, which is a huge entity?
Let me first start off by setting the scene a little bit, what I've done in business ethics, and then I come to your question. Since a few years, I'm working with Carsten Bredemeyer, who is a Protestant theologist and who has lectures in business ethics at two universities here in Germany. And we always discussed about this topic, similar to my projects when I wrote about it. And then we decided at some point in time, we really need to do exactly what you asked for. We need to define it. And then we need to think about how can we help companies to solve the problems that they have. Now, the driver for business ethics, and I really think that business ethics is the next big thing. It's the next game changer after all the discussions about sustainability and ESG. And I'll tell you why. Society is so volatile. People facing so much pressure due to ever continuing challenges and changes in the society, that they need to have an angle, they need to have an anchor that they rely on. And this anchor used to be, in this part of the world, the church, the family, many things, the school, authorities. Now, all these things are probably still there, but they don't have the relevance anymore that they had in the past. So people need an anchor. One of the anchor that people usually have is their employer. And when you talk to people that are much younger than the two of us, well, you are younger than myself, but even younger, then if you ask them what they want to do and where they want to work, then they say, I want to work for an ethical company. So for us, the driver is really that there is a big change towards the society, and people demand for ethical values. They probably don't call it ethical values, but they demand for values. Secondly, there is a big change in the business world where old business models are not working anymore. And we mentioned the transformation to as-a-service models, but there is obviously much more going on. The old mantra of selling more and driving more with exploiting resources out in the nature is just coming to an end. And it's very clear. You see that with climate change, but you see that everywhere. The level of soil that is being covered with asphalt and concrete in this country is like increasing every year dramatically. And at some point in time, we just will not have forest anymore. We will not have meadows anymore, anything else. So there has to be a change, and growth has to be decoupled from using resources. Now, what we have done is we've built a scientific method that for the first time, and this is really brand new, links business outcomes to ethical behavior. And this is super relevant, because normally when you would talk to companies and you would tell them all these rationales, they would say, oh yeah, that's great, but let's do that tomorrow. Let's fix my revenue and my profit this quarter, and then tomorrow we talk about ethics. And obviously this tomorrow will not exist, because then there will be no tomorrow. Mm. So we have really come across this challenge, where we work with universities to really scientifically prove that you can link ethical behavior to business outcomes. And business outcomes can be manifold, can be revenue, can be profitability, but can also be employee satisfaction, can be attrition rates. One of the top reasons why people quit their employers is actually ethical considerations or value considerations. So we've built this methodology, and we have rolled out this methodology now to the first customers, and really trying to scale it now out to the market, because we believe that there is a big demand out, and we believe that companies who apply this methodology will be more successful at the end.
With the whole thing about that, there will be more concrete, right? I mean, Saudi Arabia tried to do something with the line project. They want to do like a kilometer, but now it's no longer going to be a kilometer, but it's smaller, what I heard from the news. But that's also like, at least they're trying to do something, right? I know they got a lot of criticism and so on from people as well, but at least they were trying to do something that still protects area around, I mean, the whole concept of building a city from scratch is not new. They have been doing it for the past. I mean, some of the projects failed in Turkey, in Saudi Arabia, and other countries as well. But you have to try at the end of the day. You have to give it a shot. If it works, you never know. Because at the end of the day, we are growing, right? In terms of population, we are increasing. I don't have the exact number, but we were 6 billion. Now we are reaching 7, and then we will be soon 8, and so on. And we definitely need to think about how do we live as well. But now talking about business ethics, right? So you are on a position where you make strategic decisions for the organization. So how do you actually ensure that ethical considerations are integrated into the strategic decisions and innovations at your organizations? Because I think that plays a really important role in the organization, to also for the people that they see, okay, my leader is not just blah, 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 but he's also saying that, okay, we need to incorporate practices for business ethics.
Yeah, and there's a couple of mechanisms that we have tested and that are very successful. But first of all, you also asked earlier what ethics is, and it's really across all business processes. And that encompasses, obviously, the strategic angle with companies, that we usually have a discussion on a board level on values, and then we cascade those values down from individual values into company values, into employer values, into customer values, and into societal values. So really thinking about what is the role of the company into the society. That's usually the first step. And then we really talk about each and every business process. And I give you an everyday example that we have at Maersk, and this is around a sales example. So obviously sales is, in terms of ethic, very, very crucial. We have, due to the Red Sea crisis and the overall shipping industry, especially the ocean freight industry, a capacity loss of approximately 20%. So 20% less capacity means that you have to prioritize. If the capacity was fully utilized before, which it was, then you just can't transport 20% of the goods. Now, an everyday discussion that we have with our leadership team and across all the levels in my org is, how do you prioritize? And how do you prioritize is a business decision on the one hand side, but it's an ethical decision even more so. Because if it's true what I said earlier, that ethically operating businesses are financially more successful, then you have to make decisions now that bring you in a very favorable financial position now and in the future. And that has to do with trust with customers, the way you communicate, the way you give these explanations to customers. And this has to do with, obviously, how to utilize the capacity, what are the current price points, what are the future price points, and how can you help customers to really overcome this. And that is mostly an ethical discussion. Now, this is one process in sales. There is a pricing element to it. There is a manufacturing or production element to ethics. There's a customer experience element. Like, one of the favorite criteria in customer experience, what we always say in ethics, is that you should treat all customers of the same segment equally well. Like, you should not differentiate if let's say a small and medium customer provides you with X or Y revenue. You need to treat them equally well, and you need to define what that means. So how do we do that in companies is we really impact the decision making across all the business functions in companies. Because we believe, and I think that's a common knowledge, that every decision is better when it's ethically backed up. Because then people can relate to it, employees can relate to it, leaders can relate to it, but also your customers can relate to it when you have an ethical backing up. And for that, you need to define in a continuum from very left to very right where you stand with your ethical operations and what the decision should be. And there is obviously not one size fits all. You can't say we are now 100% ethical versus we are 0% ethical. It's a continuum, and you need to define where is your point in between that you can rationally justify, that is linked to your business outcomes and that makes your customer happy. And this is the everyday decision where we have developed a framework where we bring these decisions into companies to make them or help them make decisions in a better way. There is also a few other things that we do. Nowadays, there is on board level people who are responsible for ESG. What we have implemented a few customers is we've implemented an advisory board member for business ethics. And this person would really talk about critical topics based on a very concrete individual example, let's say of a customer case, that are valid across the whole organization. And then they would facilitate this discussion among the level of directors or among the level of board, and then bring that back into the organization. So we call that an ethical advisory board. Mm-hmm. That's another thing. And the third thing is we have technology as well developed where we can where we can create this link from inputs to outputs, so that we can say which business input factors across all value chain, across all processes, impact the outcomes from an ethical point of view. And we can do a reverse regression as well, where we say, if you want to be, let's say, 10% more successful in hiring, then you got to do these things on your input side. And that obviously now sounds much easier than it is. Every company is different. Every industry is different. So there's a lot to do in individual works to really iron this out, but the methodology is solid and is there. Mm. I also want to be honest, there are some industries where we really struggle in finding ethical solutions. Like the fashion industry is a good example. We really haven't found it. So if anyone is out there and wants to help us and run a project with us and guide us around, we'd be super excited to do that. Because in fashion in general, we find it very hard to really rework the whole model towards an ethical model that is still highly profitable.
Hmm. No, that's true. I mean, the thing is, I have one question to the first point you mentioned, which is like, I know software companies, what they do is they say that, look, we are selling enterprise software. If any customer brings us less than 50,000 euros of ARR, annual recurring revenue, we will say no to them. You know, only we work with them if we foresee that, okay, this company can become in the next 1 to 2 years a customer with ARR more than 50,000 euros. I found it a little bit strange because when I was looking for vendors as well last year, I was struggling so much with the same problem that when I went to a potential vendor and I would say, hey, can you give me the solution, because I can't just sign up. And I was willing to pay, but my team was small, around 30 people. And they said no upfront. So what do you think? Because I felt it's a little bit unfair, for example, for me, because I would like to have those processes in my team, but I cannot afford it because my team is not big enough.
So from an ethical standpoint, I think one of the topics that you raised is the honesty towards customers. And I think it's probably fair that companies make decisions to whom they sell and at which price points. And as long as they treat customers equally, so they do it consistently, then from an ethical point of view, it's probably fine. The other aspect is the way of communication. So in your example, you mentioned that they were upfront telling you that they would not be interested in that business. I think, again, you might not like it, but ethically, that's usually considered as a good practice to do. It's much better than if you would just tell the customer an excuse or find something else or tell them, oh yeah, we look into it a few months from now. I guess you sometimes have those people who you contact and then they said, oh yeah, I come back to you in a month after my project, and then they never come back to you. Similar to a customer example here, that would be considered unethical. They should just say, hey, I'm not interested. So I think in that point, it's fine. On the other hand, there's also an ethical dimension in the literature that companies should strive for making their services and products available to a large audience of customers. Because if these services and products are valuable to the market and to customers, then obviously one company goal should be, hey, let's bring it out to as many customers as possible. And that's, by the way, a great segue into what I said earlier about growth and profitability. So ethics and growth are really things that work together. They are not two sides of a coin. They're really things that work together. This example is a great one. I think in your example to this company, the question would be, what has to be true so that they can serve smaller customers and be even more profitable with them than as if they only serve large customers. And I remember at Amazon, we had these discussions every day, because every day there was a question, where would customers be segmented into? Would they be segmented into a self-service automated channel where nobody would touch them and they would just buy on their own and consume services on their own? Or would they be given an account manager team? Or would they be given a dedicated account manager or even a global account manager? And so this is a business decision. Again, as long as you make it fair and transparent and consistent, then I would say there's really nothing to worry about it. Sorry, Majid, to say.
No, the thing is, I mean, when I found a solution, so I actually ended up with another corporate. I went to them, got a contact from someone, and I went to them. They said, "Look, you contacted us. It's good, but the thing is, this legal entity only serves bigger customers. More than if you have more than 10,000 employees. One, even if we were to talk, right, the solution would be way too expensive because of the way we are structured. So we cannot cater less than 10,000 employees. It would be impossible for us, and we would not make money. We would not be able to help you out." And then they said, "We, however, have another entity which is owned by us, but it's for literally people up to 9,999 employees, and you can sign up there, pay there." They said, and they have a different altogether structure of how they operate. And they said, there you don't even need to talk to anyone. You just go sign up for free, test it out if it works or not, and then if it works out, you can start paying in, like, I think after a month of trial or 2 months of trial. And we were using that software at the end of the day because it was so good. It was simple. I was looking for a simple solution, so I was like, this was a better approach. They catered to the smaller business also, like you mentioned, right, that if we want to do it in a self automated manner, I think that still at the end of the day, a business is a business, right? I would also love to have some processes in place that basically help my team as well. But now I just realized that we are also almost 50 minutes into 50 or more minutes into the conversation. So now, because I have a question about how do you balance the pursuit of growth and innovation with the need to maintain ethical standards, especially considering the whole competitive pressure, like someone innovated before you, or they launch, quickly.
I think it's a question that I could speak for another 50 minutes, but to give you a quick answer, I think it's really about being very honest and upfront right at the beginning. And it's about knowing your own strength and knowing what you can do, and then be honest with the customers. Like when at Amazon, when we discussed with public sector entities, we were very upfront about the revenue structure and how the business model works and what would work well and what would not work well with public entities. And we were very upfront in how the collaboration would look like and how we could really generate value. And then it might not paid off in this month or in this quarter, but it always paid off in the long run. And there's actually, in this instance, there's a lot of studies around that in the long run, a ethical behavior is always paying off, even in industries that are very challenging. I'll give you an example. In automotive procurement in the United States, there's since years a yearly study around OEMs and their relation to tier one suppliers. And they have clearly related to that ethical operations is in the long run more profitable. And it might be a profitable dip in a short run where you change from your current behavior to an ethical behavior, but in the long run, it's always like this. So I think you have to be patient. You have to be patient, and you have to make sure that you really, follow your vision and be honest about it, and then it will be successful.
I felt that's like a balance, a balance of what you did, and also a balance of advice for the people, businesses, who are listening. And in your experience, what do you think? Like, how do the business ethics actually influence in long-term success and reputation in the B2B sector in general, or technology sector?
I think it's everything that you can do, because especially in B2B, everything is about relationships and everything is about contacts and predictability of your operations. So if you have operations that are ethically driven and that are predictable for your customers, then it will have a long-term success. And that's from really all the discussions that we had with customers here, that many other studies show. The question is always about the short-term impact and how you can mitigate that.
Interesting. And because now we are also coming to an end, I would love to ask you more questions, but sadly we also need to keep it like within the time frame of an hour. Maybe I should ask you to come again. But
definitely. Happy to do so. We can talk about diversity next time and how to manage hyper-diverse operations.
That could be a good point. Maybe I write it down in my notes, and then once you're back in Berlin, then we can sync up for that. But as a last question, I would love to understand any advice you would like to give business owners, or leadership people about business ethics? Like, what do they need to think about business ethics, and why do you think the time is now to consider business ethics?
I think first of all, they should think about themselves, and they should think about their family. If they have kids or a partner, they should think about what is the society that their kids or other kids want to live in a few years from now. Even if you don't have kids, I think you feel that many things are changing right now, and there's a need for values and consistency. And I think one thing that I'm always thinking about is when after a year after years of successful career, probably nobody will ask you at the end how you have won a certain deal, or how much money you have earned, or how successful you were. But what people will ask you is, which impact have you made? And now everybody nowadays loves to talk about impact. And I think it's one of these buzzwords that you have to be careful about what it really means. But one thing, what it means to me is, what is really the legacy that you end? And anybody can impact and change the legacy to the better that they end, irrespective of where you are. If you're a business owner, that's probably very clear. You can think about what do you do besides earning money for the society, and how you can bind those two bits together. If you are a leader of leaders, as I said earlier, in an organization, then you can think about how can you educate your leaders to become better versions of yourself, to make an impact into the society. And if you are, let's say, an individual contributor, obviously you're probably the one who have the impact and the discussions every day with partners, with customers. And every of these discussions, as we said earlier, matters. Every of these discussions brings you forward. And if you can bring a little bit of ethical thought towards all these discussions, there will be a much better world at the end. And I think that's what everybody should strive for.
Mm-hmm. No, that's valuable advice. I mean, to all the leaders and listeners, and if you're becoming a manager for the first time, I think it also applies to you. So take the advice. I mean, it's good advice. But with that, thank you so much for joining in today, Burkard. It was really insightful and also fun. And as a closing remark, is there something you would like to share with me and the listeners?
Yeah, obviously, as you know, I like to talk a lot, so I always like to share things. I think I mentioned earlier a notion of cross-discipline, and I mentioned that I like to go to contemporary art exhibitions. One of the many things that I got inspirations from is really connecting the dots with different disciplines. And I remember I was recently in a gallery, and then I looked at the way how they were separating the walls and hanging their exposés on the walls. And then I thought that's actually a great idea to fix something in my basement. Just by looking at the technology and the tools that they used, certain metal frames. And this is exactly this kind of connection that you want to have. You want to look throughout the world, not only with one angle of business or one angle with life, but you want to really combine things. And then you'll be able to develop something new. You come to creative solutions. And it's also, again, much more fun than if you just execute whatever you have done in the past. So be creative, be open, and look out in the world what's there.
Mm-hmm. No, thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm definitely going to use that last sentence in now whenever I refer to creativity.
Thank you. It was a pleasure, Majid. It was a fun conversation. I really love to do that much more often.
Would love to. I mean, we are just now slowly growing as well. Also, the whole podcast. I mean, it's doing good. But thank you so much again. So to our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to the Executives this week. If you found this episode valuable, don't forget to subscribe and share it with your network. Burkard's links would be mentioned in the description section. So you can probably get a book, I believe, on Amazon. So I would mention those links. Until next time, this is Majid signing off.